The Stoics knew something you've forgotten. The loudest person in the room is almost always the weakest. You've been taught that silence equals submission, that not responding means you've lost, that explaining yourself proves your worth. But Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, and he knew the opposite was true. So why? Why are you still explaining yourself? Here's what society sold you. Speak up. Defend yourself. Make your voice heard. Every insult deserves a comeback. Every criticism demands a response. Stay silent and they'll think you're weak. They'll think you agree. They'll think you've surrendered. This is the con of the modern world. It wants you loud, reactive, and exhausted. Because a person constantly explaining themselves is a person constantly losing power. The Stoics understood something most people never learn. Silence isn't weakness. It's not submission. It's not defeat. Silence, when wielded correctly, is the most strategic weapon you possess. It's a mental fortress. It's dominance without declaration. The world mistakes your silence for absence, for passivity, for emptiness. They're catastrophically wrong. Marcus Aurelius sat on the throne of Rome. He commanded legions. He could have spoken and nations would tremble. Yet in his private writings, in those meditations he never intended anyone to read, he returns again and again to a single theme: restraint, control, the power of the withheld word. He writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Epictetus, born a slave, understood this even more deeply. He taught, first, say nothing. When you must speak, say little. When you must say much, say it once. These men lived in different stations, one enslaved, one emperor, yet both arrived at the same truth. Your words are your power, and power carelessly spent is power permanently lost. Think about your modern life. Social media conditions you to react. Someone posts something offensive, your fingers itch. Someone subtweets you, you want to clarify. Someone misunderstands your intent, you rush to explain. Every day, you bleed energy into the void, trying to control how strangers perceive you. This is the exhaustion of our age. The Stoics called it apatheia, not apathy as we know it, but freedom from being disturbed by external events. You cannot achieve this freedom if you're enslaved to every voice that demands your response. Here's a practice Marcus used: the 24-hour rule. When something provoked him, when an insult landed, when a decision seemed urgent, he waited. One full rotation of the sun. He observed his reaction without acting on it. And here's what he discovered. Most provocations, when left alone, dissolve into irrelevance. The insult that felt unbearable at noon, by the next noon, is forgotten by everyone except the person still defending themselves. But let me show you something darker. Something you've been doing without realizing it. Weak people talk constantly. Not because they have much to say, but because silence terrifies them. Silence forces confrontation with the self. When you stop performing, stop explaining, stop justifying, you're left with a question. Who am I when no one's watching, when no one's listening, when there's no audience to convince? The empty barrel makes the most noise. This is not a metaphor. It's an acoustic fact, and it's a psychological truth. Those who are certain, who are grounded, who possess genuine power, they don't need to announce it. They don't need your validation. They don't need to prove anything. Their presence speaks. Their silence commands. Watch any corporate meeting. There's always someone who talks incessantly. They interrupt, they over-explain, they dominate the conversation. And there's always someone who speaks once, maybe twice, with precision. Who gets promoted? Who holds real influence? It's never the loudest. It's the one who makes every word count, because they've learned the value of strategic silence. Think about modern dating. Someone constantly texting, constantly needing reassurance, constantly explaining their feelings. What does that signal? Insecurity, desperation, a lack of center. Compare that to someone who's present when they're with you, but doesn't need to fill every silence with noise. Who doesn't overshare? Who maintains mystery? Which one commands respect? Which one do you chase? Marcus Aurelius observed, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." Extend this. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value, period, if you're certain of your own character. What strangers think of you, what critics say, what trolls type, this is their prison, not yours. You don't owe them explanations. You don't owe them your peace. You don't owe them anything. Here's the trap most people fall into. Justification. Someone attacks your decision. You immediately launch into defense. Well, actually, the reason I did that is because, stop. The moment you defend, you've accepted their frame. You've agreed that you owe them an explanation. You've surrendered your sovereignty. A king doesn't explain his decrees to peasants, not because he's arrogant, but because explanation implies equal standing in judgment. Now, there's a technique the emperor used. You can learn it tonight. The Stoics developed what I call the silence arsenal, tactical applications of non-response. These aren't passive tactics. They're active choices. They're weapons. First, the pause of power. When someone attacks you, insults you, tries to provoke you, here's what you do. Nothing. You pause. You take 5 breaths. You feel the urge to respond. You observe it like watching a wave approach the shore, and you let it pass. In that pause, something remarkable happens. The attacker becomes uncomfortable. They were expecting a reaction. Your silence disrupts their script. They don't know what to do with it. Often they'll continue talking, and in their discomfort, they'll reveal their true motivations, their insecurities, their weaknesses. Modern example, it's 2 a.m. You receive an inflammatory email from a colleague. Your heart rate spikes. Your mind races with the perfect response. Here's what the Stoic does. Close the laptop. Do not respond. In the morning, with a clear mind, you'll realize the email was written by someone exhausted, emotional, and reckless. Your silence forces them to wake up and reread what they sent. Often by sunrise, you'll receive an apology. If you'd responded at 2 a.m., you'd have 2 people in the mud instead of 1 fool in a hole they dug themselves. Second, the strategic non-answer. Someone provokes you. You respond, but not to their provocation. You respond to the emotion beneath it. I can see you're upset. I'll think about what you've said. Then, silence. No follow-up, no debate, no defense. This is devastating. You've acknowledged them without engaging their content. You've maintained composure while they spiral. And here's what happens next. They unravel. Because the fight they wanted, you refused to have. The drama they craved, you denied them. Your calm becomes a mirror showing them their chaos. Third, the exit without explanation. This is perhaps the most powerful. leaving a toxic situation, a draining relationship, a pointless argument, without justifying your departure. No closure for those who don't deserve your energy. You simply leave. They'll demand explanations. Why won't you talk to me? Why are you being like this? Don't I deserve to know? And your answer is silence, because explanation is a gift, and not everyone has earned it. This isn't cruelty. It's boundaries. Modern application. You have a friend who only calls when they need something, who never listens, who drains you every interaction. The old you would have a long conversation about boundaries, about how they make you feel, giving them another chance to apologize and repeat the pattern. The Stoic simply stops answering. They notice. They ask why. You don't explain. The friendship fades. They learn nothing, because they can't manipulate your words against you. They simply experience the consequence of their actions, which is your absence. Fourth, the one-sentence boundary. When pressed, when cornered, when someone demands justification, you have one response. I don't discuss my personal decisions. Then silence. No elaboration. No defense. No weakening of the boundary with because or but. Just a clear line. They'll push. They'll say you're being difficult, unreasonable, cold. Let them. Your silence holds the boundary better than 1,000 words of explanation ever could. But now, you're probably thinking something. What about when silence feels like cowardice? This is the question that haunts people learning this practice. There's a fine line between strategic silence and fearful hiding. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus taught that silence is not avoidance, it's precision. Silence isn't refusing to speak, it's choosing when speech matters. So when do you break silence? The Stoic speaks in 3 situations. First, when someone else's dignity is at stake. Not your own, theirs. If you witness injustice, abuse, someone being dehumanized, your silence becomes complicity. The Stoic defends the defenseless. Marcus Aurelius writes, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Second, when a principle requires defense. Not your ego, a principle. If someone attacks not you but a truth you hold sacred, if they spread lies that harm others, if they violate a boundary that protects something greater than yourself, then you speak. But notice, you're not defending yourself. You're defending something beyond yourself. Third, when silence would cause greater harm than speech. Sometimes not speaking enables dysfunction. An intervention with an addict, reporting harassment, ending an abusive relationship. These moments require words. But even here, the Stoic speaks with precision, with calm, with the minimum necessary to achieve the outcome. Never from rage, never from ego, always from necessity. The difference is motive. Strategic silence comes from strength. Fearful silence comes from avoidance. Ask yourself, am I being silent because this doesn't deserve my energy or because I'm afraid of confrontation? One is power, the other is prison. Marcus faced this dilemma constantly. As emperor, he could command anything. Yet he writes about restraint, about suffering fools, about choosing which battles matter. He had the power to punish every insult, but he knew most insults are beneath the dignity of response. Here's an exercise. For the next 5 minutes of your life, after this video, think deeply about this question. What silence are you hiding behind? Where are you avoiding necessary confrontation under the guise of Stoic restraint? Because that's not philosophy. That's fear wearing a philosopher's mask. The Stoics were warriors. They faced death. They didn't hide, but they chose their battles with ruthless discernment. Now, let's enter the modern battlefield where this philosophy matters most. You live in a world designed to extract your voice. Every platform, every algorithm, every notification wants you talking, reacting, engaging. Because your attention is the commodity. Your outrage is the product, and you're giving it away for free, thinking you're fighting for justice, for truth, for your values. Most of the time, you're just feeding a machine that profits from your exhaustion. Social media rewards the loudest voices. The algorithm doesn't promote wisdom, it promotes engagement. Anger, shock, outrage, these get clicks. Measured responses, thoughtful silence, these die in obscurity. So you're incentivized to perform, to have takes on everything, to never just not have an opinion. This is civilizational madness. Marcus Aurelius didn't have Twitter, but he understood the same dynamic. He writes, "The first rule is, don't be disturbed, for most things don't deserve disturbance." Translate this to modern terms. Most tweets don't deserve your reply. Most comments don't deserve your clarification. Most hot takes don't deserve your attention. Your silence is not ignorance, it's discernment. Reply culture has trained you to think every comment demands response. Someone misunderstands your point, you must correct them. Someone asks an invasive question, you must answer. Someone tags you in drama, you must address it. No, you don't. You owe strangers nothing. Your energy is finite. Your peace is precious. Guard it like Marcus guarded Rome. Let me give you real-world applications, because philosophy without practice is just intellectual entertainment. Family gatherings. Your uncle makes provocative political statements, clearly trying to bait you into an argument. The old you takes the bait, spends 3 hours in a debate that convinces no one and ruins the evening. The stoic you smiles slightly, says nothing, and passes the potatoes. Your uncle is baffled. He wanted the fight. Your silence denied him. He looks foolish arguing with someone who won't engage. By dessert, everyone's forgotten his comments, but they remember your composure. Work politics. A colleague passive-aggressively undermines you in a meeting. "Oh, I'm surprised you went with that approach. I would have thought someone with your experience would know better." They're waiting for you to defend yourself, to get emotional. Instead, you pause. You look at them calmly. You say, "Thank you for your input," and move on. No defense, no explanation, no emotion, just calm acknowledgement and redirection. After the meeting, others approach you. "I can't believe they said that. How did you stay so calm?" Your silence made you look powerful. Their attack made them look petty. Relationships. Your partner is upset and trying to provoke you into a fight. They're not attacking you. They're attacking themselves through you. They want you to react so they can justify their feelings. The untrained response is to defend, to fight back, to match their energy. The stoic response, "I can see you're hurting. I'm here when you're ready to talk about what's really wrong." Then you give them space. Often, they'll come back hours later, calmer, and address the real issue. Your silence gave them room to find themselves. Friendships. You have a friend who calls only to vent, never to listen. Every conversation is them unloading for an hour while you nod and absorb the chaos. One day, You simply stop answering as quickly. You set boundaries with your time. They notice. They ask if everything's okay. You say, I'm making space for relationships that feel balanced. That's it. No long explanation, no accusation, just a boundary. They either respect it or they fade. Either way, your life improves. Here's a 48-hour practice. For 2 days, do not respond to any inflammatory message, not one. Someone texts you something aggressive, read it and don't reply. Someone posts something offensive, scroll past. Someone sends a passive-aggressive email, let it sit. Watch what happens. In 48 hours, most situations resolve themselves. The problems you thought needed your immediate attention didn't. They needed time to dissolve. Your silence was the solution, not the problem. But here's the deepest layer. The hardest opponent isn't out there. The hardest opponent is in here. The loudest noise isn't the world around you. It's the voice inside your head, the constant commentary, the self-judgment, the replaying of conversations, the rehearsing of future arguments, the voice that says, you're not enough, or you're too much, or you should have said this, or why did you say that? This internal noise, this is the battlefield that determines everything. Marcus Aurelius struggled with this daily. His meditations aren't confident declarations. They're a man reminding himself every night of basic truths he keeps forgetting. You have power over your mind, not outside events. He's not telling you, he's telling himself for the 1000th time, because even an emperor, even a philosopher, even a Stoic fights this battle. The inner voice is rarely your own. It's your parents' disappointment, your teacher's criticism, your society's expectations, your ex's insults, your friends' jealousies. All these voices you've internalized, and now they play on repeat, and you think they're you. They're not. They're echoes, ghosts, recordings of wounds. To practice true silence, you must quiet these voices. Marcus had a practice. Every evening before sleep, he would review his day, not with judgment, but with observation. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What will I do differently tomorrow? This isn't self-criticism, it's self-knowledge. It's the difference between I am bad and I made a mistake. One is identity, the other is behavior. Modern neuroscience validates what the Stoics taught. Your brain has a default mode network, the voice that narrates your life when you're not focused on a task. For most people, this network is negative. It criticizes, it worries, it replays failures. But it's trainable. Every time you notice the voice and choose not to believe it, you weaken its hold. Every time you redirect to observation rather than judgment, you reclaim your mind. Here's a practice, the evening audit. Before you sleep, ask yourself 4 questions. First, what did I say today that I regret? Not to punish yourself, but to learn. Second, what silence did I maintain successfully? Celebrate this. Third, where did I speak from ego versus necessity? Be honest. Fourth, tomorrow, name one situation where I'll practice silence. Just one. This daily practice over weeks transforms you. The paradox that takes years to understand. True silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the absence of noise. You can be in a loud room and maintain inner silence. You can be alone in quiet and have a screaming mind. External silence means nothing if internally you're at war. Internal silence means everything, even if the world around you is chaos. Marcus understood this. He ruled Rome during plagues, wars, betrayals. His external life was constant noise, but his meditations reveal a man who built an inner fortress, a place no external circumstance could breach. He writes, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This is the goal, an inner sanctuary that no insult, no crisis, no chaos can penetrate. Now we arrive at the threshold. Can you handle what's next? When you stop performing, when you stop explaining, when you stop defending, something dies. The version of you that needed approval, the identity built on what others think, the self that existed only in reflection of external validation. This death is terrifying, because for many people, this performed self is the only self they know. Kill it, and who are you? Marcus Aurelius faced this question constantly. He was emperor. Every day people told him he was great, powerful, divine. Every day he had to remind himself, "You're just a man. You'll die." All these titles, this power, this legacy, it's temporary. He practiced memento mori. Remember you must die, not to be morbid, but to be free, free from the tyranny of reputation. On his deathbed, Marcus looked back. All the speeches he gave, all the debates he won, all the times he defended Rome, his decisions, his character, and none of it mattered. What mattered was who he was when no one was watching. What mattered was the character he built in silence, the restraint he practiced in private, the values he upheld when they were costly. Your legacy isn't your words. Anyone can talk. Your legacy is your character, and character is built in the moments you don't explain yourself, the times you don't defend, the situations where you could destroy someone with a sentence, but you choose silence. These moments, these invisible choices, this is where you're actually forged. Here's the aha moment. Silence isn't about controlling others. It's about freeing yourself from the need to control how others see you. The ultimate power is indifference to judgment, not because you don't care about doing right, but because you know what's right, and their opinion is irrelevant to that knowledge. The modern Stoics vow, say this out loud: "I will speak when silence would harm. I will be silent when speech would drain. I will guard my energy like an emperor guards his empire. Because my attention is my sovereignty." Remember the question I asked at the beginning? Why are you still explaining yourself? Now you know the answer. You were never explaining yourself. You were defending yourself from ghosts, from echoes, from voices that don't even remember what they said to you. You were fighting battles that existed only in your mind, spending energy on people who weren't even paying attention. Marcus Aurelius died in 180 AD in a military camp during a plague. His last words were simple: "Go to the rising sun, for I am setting." Not a speech, not a defense of his reign, not a justification of his decisions, just acceptance. His silence, in that final moment, spoke louder than the 59 years of words that came before. The empire he built externally crumbled within generations. The empire he built internally, his writings, his philosophy, his example of character, that has lasted 2,000 years. So here's your challenge. Not a call to action, a call to inaction. For the next 7 days, practice 1 hour of complete silence daily. No talking, no texting, no responding. Just observe. Notice who gets uncomfortable with your silence. Those are the people who need your chaos to distract from their own. Notice who respects it. Those are your people. Notice what happens inside you when you stop filling the void with noise. What thoughts surface? What voices emerge? What truths can you finally hear? The Stoics knew something we forgot in our age of constant communication. Power isn't in the loudest voice. Power isn't in having an opinion on everything. Power isn't in explaining yourself until everyone understands. Power is in the voice that doesn't need to be heard, because it's already certain. Certain of its values, certain of its path, certain that judgment from others is just wind passing through leaves, making noise, signifying nothing. You are the emperor of your inner world. The voices, the thoughts, the reactions, these are your subjects. Will you let them riot and rebel and run wild? Or will you govern them with discipline, with restraint, with the quiet authority of someone who knows, truly knows, that most of what demands your voice doesn't deserve it? Act like an emperor. Rule from silence. Thank you for listening in silence.